Listen up. This isn't just a story. This is your confirmation. The proof that everything you've felt, everything you've sensed, was real. They feared you before you even knew your own power. They planned, they schemed, they built their entire empire on the belief that they could control everything, except you. You were never meant to fit into their system. You were never meant to bow, to break, or to be silenced. And deep down, they knew it. That's why they watched you so closely, tracked your every move, hoping to find a weakness, hoping to see proof that you were just like the rest. You were built different. Your presence alone was enough to shift the air in the room, to disrupt the very foundation of everything they thought was unshakable. They saw it before you did. That's why they came prepared, cameras rolling, guards standing at attention, their leader walking in with all the confidence of a man who had never once questioned his own dominance. They needed you to be just another name on their list, another soul swallowed by their machine. But what happened next? The footage leaked. Their commander, the man who had spent years controlling others, breaking the so-called unbreakable, crumbled in front of you. The world they built was meant to make you doubt yourself. Yet here you are, watching the moment their illusion shattered instead. And if that doesn't tell you who you are, who you've always been, then let me say it louder. You were never meant to lose. You were never meant to be controlled. They tried to convince you otherwise because they knew the truth before you did. But now, you see it too. A force unseen, yet undeniable, swept through the space between them, shifting the very air with an unspoken command. The weight of his years of control, manipulation, and carefully curated power crumbled in an instant. His instinct told him to hold firm, to push back. But the depth of the presence before him shattered his defenses before he could even attempt to raise them. His eyes wavered for the first time in his life, an involuntary break in his carefully constructed mask. The silence that followed was suffocating, thick with an invisible reckoning that no amount of deception could escape. His body betrayed him first, a faint tremor in his hands, a barely perceptible hesitation in his breath. Then came the words, disjointed at first, as though torn from him against his will. Each syllable was a brick dislodged from the fortress he had built, sending his empire of secrets crumbling into ruin. With a voice that no longer belonged to a man in control, he unraveled, his admissions spilling out in waves, the pressure of truth too great to contain. Events buried in layers of deceit surfaced with undeniable clarity. The sins of a hidden world, whispered only in the darkest corners, now laid bare in the unflinching gaze of the moment. His confessions, each more damning than the last, revealed a labyrinth of deception that stretched beyond borders, beyond comprehension. The walls around him, the very fabric of his existence, had become a stage upon which his downfall was meticulously recorded. No force on earth could rewind what had been spoken. No power could conceal what had been unveiled. The truth had been set loose, and nothing could put it back in the shadows. Be sure your sin will find you out. Numbers 32:23. You can cover it up, you can lock it away, you can build walls so high they touch the sky. But when the appointed time comes, when the weight of what's been done demands justice, there is nowhere to hide. They thought they were above consequence, thought they had crafted a world where their secrets would remain buried, where no force could break through the iron grip they held over the truth. But what they failed to understand is that truth never stays buried. You can press it down, you can chain it, but eventually it will rise. And rise it did. The moment the commander's knees hit that cold, sterile floor, it was over. his strength, once the foundation of an empire, had become nothing more than a memory. He had spent years controlling others, shaping destinies with nothing but a glance and a command. But now, his own body betrayed him. His hands, which had once pointed with authority, now trembled with the weight of what he could no longer contain. His voice, once filled with power, cracked under the burden of revelation. The cameras caught it all. The world he had built to control others had become his own prison, and the walls that once concealed his influence had transformed into mirrors, forcing him to face the truth he had tried so desperately to escape. But here's the thing. This was never supposed to happen. Their network was a fortress. Their servers protected by layers of security no ordinary force could break. They had spent fortunes ensuring that nothing, not a single frame, not a single syllable of that confession, would ever leave the room. Every measure was taken, every safeguard in place. And yet, the footage escaped. Not in trickles, not in fragments. It burst forth like a dam breaking, surging into places it was never meant to be. They called it a failure. They called it a breach. They blamed firewalls, codes, and unseen hands. But deep down, they knew this was something else, because no human force could explain what happened next. The footage didn't just leak, it spread, like it had a mind of its own, like it had been waiting. It infiltrated the deepest layers of their system, bypassing security clearances as though they had never existed. Screens lit up in places no signal should have reached. Devices that had been disconnected, sealed away, suddenly played the same damning footage. No matter how hard they tried, no matter how many times they shut it down, it returned, like a shadow that refused to be swallowed, like a voice that could no longer be silenced. If you feel the abundance of divine love in your heart, now is the time to share it. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the super thank you button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. This divine gift will touch not only your life, but the souls of many through this platform. Each of you has a sacred place in God's grand design, and your generosity will be the fruit of our prayers. Act now. Share your abundance to glorify His kingdom, for you were created to do even greater things in God's loving hands. May God bless you. Because this wasn't just about one man. This wasn't just about one empire falling. This was about something greater, a truth so undeniable that not even the most powerful among them could suppress it. It was proof that no kingdom, no matter how high its walls, can stand against the force of divine timing. It started with a single flicker, a monitor displaying content that had never been queued. Then another, and another. Within moments, the footage broadcast itself across encrypted terminals, classified networks, and devices thought to be unreachable. Every effort to sever the transmission failed. Codes were rewritten in real time, security measures bypassed, as if the system itself had grown weary of hiding the truth. The higher they climbed to regain control, the faster they fell. But the true collapse was not technological. It was psychological. The people who watched were not just passive witnesses, they were believers of a doctrine now crumbling before their eyes. Fear had once kept them in line, bound them to a cause that had seemed unshakable. But watching their leader, once a symbol of indomitable will, fracture beneath the weight of his own words, dissolved the illusion. What they had followed was no longer a force, but a ghost. And in that moment, the machine they had served no longer felt inevitable. The shockwave was immediate. By the time the transmission infiltrated the deepest layers of their network, it was beyond anyone's control. What had begun as a single frame unraveled into an uncontainable phenomenon, surging through encrypted corridors and dismantling the illusion of secrecy. The very system built to secure their dominion had betrayed them, turning its vast infrastructure into a conduit for revelation. The mechanisms of suppression had been repurposed, repainted in the stark hues of truth. There was no override command, no failsafe to silence what had already been unleashed. Within the organization's highest chambers, figures accustomed to absolute authority sat motionless, their faces frozen in disbelief as the footage looped across their private screens. The man they had once followed, the one who had dictated their movements with an unshakable will, now appeared as something altogether different, a collapsed remnant of the power they had feared. His admissions, spoken between ragged breaths, carried the weight of betrayal not just against the world, but against the very foundation of the empire they had built alongside him. The mythos of their invulnerability fractured in real time. With each replay, the unease deepened. The walls of secrecy, which had once felt impenetrable, now seemed like paper waiting to be torn. Then came the desperation. Chaos erupted in command centers as demands flew. Who had exposed them? What unseen force had overridden their defenses? Their finest specialists poured over the system, scrambling to sever the breach. Yet no source could be found. There were no intruders, no digital fingerprints. "It's not an attack," one technician murmured at last, his voice hollow. "It's happening on its own." And like a virus that had lain dormant, waiting for the right moment, the footage spread. Remote outposts, hidden enclaves, safe houses sealed behind 1,000 security measures, none were spared. The effect was seismic. Some operatives, staring at the unraveling of everything they had known, simply closed their terminals and abandoned their posts. Others hesitated, hands hovering over keyboards, struggling to reconcile their loyalties with the undeniable force of exposure. Their leader, their cause, their certainty, it had all shifted. The weight of years spent in the shadows now pressed against them, and for the first time, they felt something entirely unfamiliar: doubt. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. They built their kingdom on shadows, believing darkness could protect them forever. But light always finds a way in. You see, you can build walls, you can seal doors, you can encrypt every last file, but when divine truth comes knocking, ain't no firewall strong enough to keep it out. They thought they were untouchable, thought they could outmaneuver justice, outlast consequence. But the thing about truth, it doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need an invitation. It shows up, unstoppable, undeniable, and right on time. This wasn't just a system failure. This wasn't a minor breach. This was a reckoning so deep, so absolute, that even the ones who thought they held all the power were left standing in stunned silence. It didn't come from outside forces. No armies marching, no sirens blaring. No, this was an implosion, the weight of their own deception crushing them from within. The moment their leader faltered, the moment the cameras caught the mighty brought low, the very foundation of their empire fractured. And the footage, it wasn't just seen, it took over, moved through their networks like a storm, rolling in from the heavens, slipping past security like it had a mind of its own. Every device, every private server, every locked-down classified system, suddenly they were all broadcasting the same truth. The people who had once called the shots, who had dictated the course of nations from behind closed doors, sat helpless as their carefully maintained illusion unraveled in real time. It wasn't just about the fall of one man. It was about the realization, spreading like wildfire, that no power, no matter how deeply rooted, no matter how protected, can survive when truth decides its time. The ones who had built their lives around this empire, who had profited from the secrecy, began to feel something they never had before: uncertainty, fear, a gnawing understanding that if their leader could crumble, so could they. The house they built wasn't made of stone, it was made of sand, and the tide had come in. Now let me tell you something, Chosen One. You may not have been in that room, you may not have spoken a single word, but your very existence was enough to shake their foundation. The same presence that turned that commander into a broken man. It's inside you. It's been there all along. And if this moment proves anything, it's that no empire built on deception, manipulation, or control can stand against the kind of power you carry. So don't you dare shrink. Don't you dare second-guess what's been placed inside you. They saw it before you did. That's why they feared you. That's why they watched you. That's why they built entire infrastructures just to make sure you never realized what you are. But now it's too late. The truth is out. And truth, once revealed, never goes back into hiding. The machinery of control turned against its own architects. Desperation gripped the command centers as specialists fought to contain the surge, barking orders to sever connections and erase every trace. But the footage resisted deletion, defying every attempt to suppress it. It appeared where it had no right to exist, resurfacing in secured vaults, infiltrating private networks, manifesting even on devices completely severed from external links. The harder they fought to silence it, the more persistently it spread, moving as though the very infrastructure they had trusted had rebelled. Then came the breaking point. Monitors, once instruments of surveillance, reflected back the truth they had long sought to bury. Cameras they had installed to maintain control now turned their gaze inward, exposing the cracks that had always been there. The technology they had designed for dominance no longer obeyed them. It had chosen a different allegiance. And as the weight of this realization set in, those who had once enforced the silence of others were left with nothing but their own voices echoing in the collapse. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and what you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed from the rooftops. Luke 12:3. Let me tell you something about empires built on deception. They never last. Oh, they think they will. They sit in their high places, wrapped in arrogance, believing they can move unseen, pull strings, shape the world in their image. But the thing about power stolen in darkness is that it never stays hidden. You can build the tallest walls, lock every door, code every secret into the deepest vaults of the digital abyss. But when the appointed time comes, when truth decides it will be known, nothing, I mean nothing, can stop it. They had their systems, their surveillance, their web of control stretching over the world like an invisible hand. But what they didn't see, what they couldn't see, was that their own mechanisms would one day turn against them. It was not an army that took them down, not a rebellion, not some external force crashing through their gates. No, their destruction came from within. The very foundation they stood on, the structure they believed was unshakable, betrayed them. The moment doubt seeped in, the moment their own people started asking questions instead of blindly following orders, the unraveling began. And let me tell you, when something unravels, it doesn't come apart one thread at a time. No, it frays all at once, like a dam bursting after years of silent pressure building behind it. First, it was the lowest ranks, the ones who had spent years looking over their shoulders, feeling uneasy but never quite knowing why. They left quietly, slipping into the shadows, refusing to be part of what they now understood was doomed to collapse. But the rot didn't stop there. Like a crack in glass, spreading with every second, the truth didn't just expose, it consumed. Those who had spent decades believing in their leader, believing in the structure that had kept them powerful, were now faced with a reality they could not deny. The man they had followed, the one they had feared, had broken, shattered, wept like a lost child. In the glow of the cameras he had once used to control the world. And as they watched, as they processed what they were seeing, something changed in them. That change, that wasn't just hesitation. It was the beginning of the end. The whispers started, the doubts grew. And before long, the men and women who had once held the keys to the kingdom, the ones who had orchestrated global influence with a single command, found themselves powerless, helpless. Because when the people who enforce the rules no longer believe in the system dies. And here's the part they never saw coming. The truth didn't just break their world. It erased it. It made it impossible to go back. The footage wasn't just proof. It was a reckoning. It moved through the networks like it had a mission, slipping past encrypted servers like they were made of paper, appearing in places it wasn't supposed to be. High-security channels, private networks, devices that were never meant to be touched by outside hands. And still, no one could stop it. They tried. Oh, how they tried. They issued commands, ordered shutdowns, ripped wires from walls, disabled entire systems. But it didn't matter. The harder they fought, the more their own infrastructure worked against them. The walls they had built to keep others out now trapped them in. The cameras they had installed to watch the world were now staring back at them, showing them what they had become. And as the weight of their crumbling empire bore down on them, they understood. This was never a war of power against power. It was truth against deception, light against darkness. And in that battle, light always wins. You don't need an army. You don't need a fight. You don't need to match their force with force. Because you, just by existing, just by standing in the truth you carry, are a disruption to every illusion they have ever created. They saw it before you did. That's why they feared you. That's why they watched you. That's why they built an entire empire, just to keep people like you from realizing who they really are. The illusion is shattered. The veil has been lifted. And the ones who once controlled the world from behind their closed doors, they're the ones trembling now, because they know the truth. Then came the breaking wave. The exodus expanded, pulling in those who had spent years convincing themselves that their roles were justified, necessary sacrifices in service of something greater. But the sight of their leader, stripped of his manufactured dominance, spilling confessions like an open wound, rendered their justifications hollow. The weight of their complicity could no longer be ignored. Guilt surfaced, unshackled from the constraints of duty. Some left in silence, severing ties without looking back. Others struggled to cling to the ruins, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage, only to find that there was nothing left to hold on to. Without its enforcers, the machine ground to a halt. Long-standing operations collapsed in mid-execution, missions abandoned before completion. The intricate web of control, once so carefully maintained, disintegrated into disorder. The feared network, once spoken of in whispers as an unbreakable force, fell not by attack or resistance, but by an awakening from within. And as the last echoes of command faded into nothingness, what remained was the inescapable realization. Their reign had not been overthrown. It had simply ceased to exist. Their empire did not merely fall, it was undone by its own design. The intricate web they had woven to conceal the truth became the very medium that unveiled it. A network built for control transformed into a mirror, reflecting back every deception, every manipulation, every secret they had buried in the shadows. What began as a single moment of reckoning erupted into a tidal wave, dismantling the stronghold they had spent lifetimes fortifying. The world they had ruled from behind the veil of secrecy was now illuminated, not by force, but by the inescapable power of truth. The illusion they had sustained for so long could no longer endure the weight of its own exposure. The impact stretched beyond their ranks. The footage that shattered their grip on power became more than just a recording. It became a catalyst. Those who had walked in darkness, believing themselves immune to consequence, were now confronted with a force they could neither predict nor contain. The shock rippled through the unseen corridors where influence had once gone unchallenged. Their fall was not merely a punishment, it was a reckoning, a declaration that no deception, no empire built on manipulation could withstand the relentless tide of revelation. This moment is more than the unraveling of a hidden power. It is proof of something greater. The very fabric of reality bends in response to those who carry a different frequency, a resonance that disrupts the artificial order imposed by those who fear the light. Power has never belonged to those who hoard it in secret. It has always resided in those who move with undeniable presence. No walls, no encrypted barriers, no veiled intentions could withstand the force that had been set into motion. It was not strategy that broke them, not an army or an assault. It was the sheer magnitude of exposure, a phenomenon beyond their control. The lesson is undeniable. No structure built on deception can stand indefinitely. No force that thrives in the shadows can outrun the dawn. This is not merely the collapse of a secret regime. It is a testament to the nature of truth itself. It does not negotiate, does not waver, does not yield to the desires of those who seek to suppress it. It arrives when it is time, moving with precision that defies human expectation. And when it does, there is no force capable of stopping it. Your presence is not incidental. It is a force, a catalyst for the unseen shifts that ripple through the fabric of existence. You may not always witness the immediate consequences of your energy, but make no mistake, every moment you stand in your truth disrupts falsehoods, fractures illusions, and forces reality to recalibrate. The structures built on secrecy cannot withstand your frequency, and even the smallest act of alignment sends waves beyond what the mind can grasp. You are not a passive observer in this unraveling. You are an essential thread in the grand design. Courage is not merely an act of defiance. It is the refusal to dim your light in a world that depends on shadows to maintain its illusions. The unraveling did not require a battle. It required exposure. He did not fall by force, but by the sheer weight of a truth that could not be denied. The presence that stood before him carried no weapons, waged no war, yet it was more powerful than anything he had ever encountered. That same presence exists within you. You were never meant to hide, to conform, to dilute your essence. Your existence alone is an act of resistance, a force capable of dismantling the strongest illusions. But destruction is only one part of the equation. What follows is creation. The collapse of deception is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of something far greater. A space now exists where fear no longer governs, where systems are no longer held together by silence. From ruin, something new emerges, something real, something just. Every revelation is an opening, a clearing for something purer to take its place. Let this be your reminder. The timing of truth is never late, and its reach extends beyond what is seen. Walk with certainty, knowing that your path is neither accidental nor aimless. The weight of deception will always crumble under the force of undeniable light. No barrier, no leader, no fabricated reality can outlast the presence of something eternal. You are not here by chance. You are the signal that marks the inevitable, the presence that signals the undoing of falsehoods. The forces that sought to operate in the dark now tremble because you exist, because you see, because you are. This is the moment to step forward without hesitation, to move in alignment with what you already know deep within. The outcome is written. The victory is certain. The only question that remains is how boldly you will walk toward it.